Out of any animation software that I've used, I think Moho is consistently one of the most interesting. Every Moho animation example that I come across on social media never fails to catch my attention for several reasons. In part because I use the software, so I'm obviously going to be interested in what people are making with it, but also because I believe Moho makes quality stylized animation look so easy and so simple that its advertising is oftentimes equally as inspiring as it might be misleading. But at 400 USD, is Moho Pro really worth the money? In this video, I'll break down my thoughts on the software as someone who's used it for personal and professional work, what I believe its strengths and weaknesses are, as well as if the software just generally lives up to the hype that I've been seeing online, or if people need to check their expectations. To be clear, everything I say in this video is my opinion, and that my opinion could change as soon as tomorrow, hypothetically, the same way that it did while making this video. Context. To give you some context, I come from animating in the traditional frame-by-frame animation software TvPaint, and compositing in Adobe After Effects. I have used many other animation software, but I've stuck to those two for most of the animation work that I've done. That being said, lately I've been considering getting more into motion design and utilizing After Effects for more animation. And that leads me to what I think Moho's first strength is. Number 1, Moho for motion design. For the movement of text, shapes, or objects, After Effects might be the obvious choice for motion design, but when it comes to characters, After Effects suddenly becomes a less attractive option. As far as I know, it is a widely known fact that After Effects is not built nor optimized for character animation. The only way to really achieve character animation in After Effects is through free or paid plugins, though from my experience, regardless of their cost, it usually feels like you're wrestling with the software to animate characters. While there is something to be said about very quickly being able to whip up something simple inside one software that you're using to make everything else, I don't think After Effects is a good option for most complex character animation work. Alternatively, Moho is a software that feels designed to be used for character animation, because it is. It's not perfect, but it's leaps ahead of After Effects in terms of its features and user experience. I do think that there's somewhat of a graphic design-ish look to the way characters appear in advertisements. Whether After Effects is limiting artists to that style, or they're intentionally utilizing it, I think Moho is great for motion designers as it gives them everything that they could possibly need to deliver. While you can always export your work from Moho and import it into After Effects for compositing, depending on the project, Moho might be enough, as the software is equipped with several compositing effects and features such as shadows, particles, glows, blurs, rim lights that you unfortunately can't see in real time, I hope they change that, and even a 3D camera. I do wish that there were adjustment layers and a way to duplicate and flatten an entire scene, as well as storyboard or manage several scenes within the same project file, but whatever, that's on my wish list. I do want to emphasize that speed and simplicity are a part of the motion designer process, and keeping everything inside After Effects definitely has its benefits. I think if I were to incorporate Moho into a motion design process, I would do so in a way that didn't replace character animation in After Effects, but rather complement it in the larger project. In other words, use Moho for specific shots or projects that require an extra level of style or complexity. For example, I think that Moho supporting physics and allowing for authentic line boil is huge for certain situations. And the fact that the software just runs smoothly is definitely nice. Number 2, Moho for animated series. I think it's debatable whether or not Moho is good for making an animated series, as I think it comes down to a few different factors, many of which are pretty subjective. These factors mainly consist of the complexity of the character's movement and the complexity of the composition and framing. While there are ways to do it, I would say that 360 character rigs are not easy to make in Moho. Unless you know what you're doing. I would say that making 360 character turns in 2D in general is pretty difficult and time consuming at the very least, but if you know what you're doing, and I would say that it's easier to do in Moho than it is in After Effects, though that's not saying much, but not as easy to do in Toon Boom Harmony. If you're okay with your character consistently being viewed at a quarter angle, and are okay with the camera's framing to be consistently placed in a way to accommodate that angle, then I could see Moho being a great option for those looking to make an animated series. Number 3, Moho for social media. One of the reasons I think Moho's social media pages are such amazing advertisements for the software is that I think Moho excels at making short animations, clips consisting of characters that are rigged to achieve a specific movement and nothing else. So if you are just looking to create a short little rigged based animation that doesn't automatically look like they were made in After Effects, or create characters that won't be reused for other shots or scenes, I think Moho does work for you. I would say that After Effects shares this advantage, though Moho really shines here as it consists of several features designed entirely around character rigging and animation that sets it apart from its competition. Moho's features. Some of Moho's best features consist of styles, to present your animation with a different feeling or medium. I would say that this is a fantastic feature that can produce so many unique looks and art styles to your animations. Liquid shapes, to merge shapes non-destructively and create 2D special effects quickly. It's a very useful feature that's well used for drawing characters with merged shapes. I wish Adobe Illustrator would work this way. Dynamic physics system, quickly add overlapping movement to your animation. This is arguably one of Moho's best features as it can save you hours of time and easily give your animation an additional level of life. Sketch bones to draw and reposition trails of bones. Curver layers. This is useful for any capes, tails, or any other bendy curved limbs. 2 different line boil effects to give your vector characters a traditional aesthetic. It's also just an amazing feature that has totally convinced me that an artist / animator is behind the development of Moho. They get it. They get it. Line boil, it looks so good. Vitruvian bones to create different angles of limbs that can be switched to. I do wish that this was a bit better designed, as I still find this feature confusing and difficult to manage. I would appreciate some sort of panel to manage different body parts or something, but whatever. Meshes to stretch and manipulate layers, and of course, actions, to create different predetermined actions that can be triggered via smart bones. Incredibly useful for head turns, arm or leg bending, or to fix areas of a rig that break that would be tedious to fix while animating. By the way, if you're enjoying this video or find it informative or interesting at all, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like on this video. Thank you, and back to the video. Price. While not cheap, Moho is significantly more affordable than other options. At $60 for the debut version and $400 for the pro version, you can own Moho forever. I've always hated the subscription model for software, so I'm happy to see one-time purchases still around when it comes to software like Moho. Okay, so with all of that said, I think Moho is a very powerful animation software that can be versatile depending on who you are and what you're wanting to use it for. Unfortunately though, there are flaws here. But before I introduce you to Moho's list of weaknesses, I want to ask a simple question. Who uses Moho? Moho's official website highlights that the software has been used in major animated feature films, television productions, and YouTube animation channel. This includes Cartoon Saloon films such as Wolfwalkers, Song of the Sea, The Breadwinner, My Father's Dragon, as well as Scavenger's Reign, the YouTube channel Cas Vandepol, and more. But one thing that I think is often exaggerated and misunderstood about these productions using Moho is to what extent and in what way the software is actually being used. In the case of Cartoon Saloon, the examples that I've personally seen range from shots with simple or minimal movement to shots consisting of slightly more dramatic and complicated movement while still being fairly simple. With Scavenger's Reign, it's a similar story, where shots seem specifically selected based on their complexity to be animated via Moho. It's never a medium to close-up shot of a character talking or acting, at least in the way that they would be if traditionally animated. And to be clear, I'm not even saying that I would expect Moho to be capable of replicating this traditional frame-by-frame animation, as believe me, I understand that rigged-based animation has its limitations and can just fundamentally not replicate that magic quality that real, actual, traditional frame-by-frame animation provides. You can't replicate traditional frame-by-frame animation. I'm gonna shoot your dreams right here, right now, if that's what you're expecting with Moho. No. You can get a feeling of that traditional feel, but you're not gonna get the same thing. And if you walk into Moho with that expectation, you're gonna probably run into a wall of frustration because, believe it or not, and I can honestly make an entire video about this, there are situations where animating things traditionally is faster than rigged animation and rigging something up. It depends what you're animating. I can make a whole video about it. It depends. Even with Cas Vandepol, the way Moho is used isn't as cut and dry as you may have assumed in hearing that they use Moho. After reaching out to one of the animators, I was enlightened by the way that 2D rigs made in Moho are merged with traditional frame-by-frame animation done in TvPaint. My point in bringing up all these examples is not to diminish the capabilities of Moho, but to remind people that just because these productions use the software doesn't necessarily mean that every shot and every scene of all of these examples are made with that software. From what I can tell, and I could be wrong about this by the way, all of these examples are predominantly using regular traditional frame-by-frame animation to achieve most shots, while using Moho where they could get away with not using frame-by-frame animation. Which, and I hope I don't have to say this, is totally valid, and I would say a clever usage of the software. I can totally understand why 2D productions would want to utilize Moho, as it can in certain situations save you a ton of time without sacrificing quality. With that being said though, Moho's official social media pages showcase a variety of creations from artists, such as yours truly, using the software to make things. These not only make Moho and rigged animation as a whole look significantly easier and faster than it actually is, but sometimes shatter the argument that I'm currently making about Moho. I am consistently blown away and inspired by the animation produced by utilizing Moho, and it really does make me wonder if the limitations or weaknesses that I mentioned in this video could be refuted by this simply being a skill issue. At least that's what I would say, if not for some of Moho's flaws being undeniable. Wait, before we continue, I just want to say I think that the remainder of this video is pretty negative in terms of talking about Moho. and thus I don't think that this video as a whole really accurately represents how I feel about the software. Kind of a fail, I guess. I think it's just easier for me to talk about the things that I wish were improved and complain than it is for me to talk about the things that I really like and probably take for granted. So with that being said, I do like Moho, but here are some of the things that I do wish were improved. 1. Drawing in Moho. One of the big benefits of Moho is that it allows you to draw the characters you rig all inside the software, as opposed to requiring you to draw them in external software like Illustrator and import them like with After Effects. Unfortunately though, I find it nearly impossible to draw in the software in the way that I would traditionally. For some reason, filling line work or shapes with color is such a messy and tedious process that I sometimes will never use the freehand draw tool when constructing a character, opting to almost exclusively use the add point tool and add shape tool to draw instead. This can result in my line work and characters as a whole looking very geometrical, abstract, and flat, but because my art style is naturally like that anyway, it's not really an issue to me. As I said, it's still a good fit for motion designers. For this segment of the video, I think I am exaggerating a little bit. It's not as bad as I make it sound. I made this entire flower animation using the freehand draw tool, but because it had that traditional color out of the lines type look, I was okay with the color being on a different layer than the line work layer. But then what if I do want to draw characters that have a regular, clean line work and fill? Again, I think I'm exaggerating, as I did make this entire animation using the freehand draw tool. The more I think about it, I think that this is more of a nitpick than a serious gripe that I have with Moho, though I do hope that Moho finds ways to make this more of a seamless and enjoyable experience, as I personally find it a little bit clunky with the context of me coming from raster-based software where I'm very loose with my strokes and less methodically placing them. I'd compare this method of using shapes to draw in Moho to how a graphic designer would draw in Adobe Illustrator. And I even think that Moho occasionally rivals Illustrator, at least in regard to how it usually treats strokes and shapes. If you do want a more organic look by drawing traditionally, it's not impossible, but it may require an even more thought out and intentional approach considering the issues that I've just mentioned. Unless you are really going into the traditional aesthetic look and you are going to have like the color being traditional brushstroke underneath the line work layer, then maybe things are different. Number 2, Moho is not built for traditional animation. It's not impossible to animate traditionally in Moho, but in addition to freehand drawing capabilities feeling underdeveloped, I don't think the Moho's animation timeline is made for frame-by-frame animation the way frame-by-frame animation software is. The focus is on rigged-based animation. Frame-by-frame animation feels tacked onto the software because it is. Number 3, tedious rigging and confusing UI. I wouldn't say that the learning curve for Moho is enormously steep, but I also wouldn't say that it's enormously shallow. While certain things might make sense from the start, in certain areas the interface is not very well designed. I could list several areas where I think that things could be better designed or developed, making Moho easier to learn and use. This includes, but is not limited to, the bone parent view being cluttered, the style panels view being confusing, the way you can't type in a bone you're looking for and have to search for it in a long list of existing bones unless you're using a script, the way the enter key doesn't trigger the renaming of a layer, forcing you to instead click on it. I've compared Moho to Spine before, but I really wish that Moho worked similarly to how Spine did in terms of rigging and workspace management, as I think that while Spine has a very niche use case, it feels very well designed and ridiculously smooth in comparison to Moho or any other software that I've used for that matter. If I describe what my biggest issue with Moho is, I'd say that overall there's unfortunately just a lot of friction that keeps me from creating fast. For example, Moho works in a way where certain tools, features, or even behaviors change based on what you're selecting and where the playhead is on the timeline. Because of this, a lot of the time I feel like I have to go through a mental checklist to see what's wrong when I'm trying to select something that I can't select or move something that I can't move. It's frustrating and it slows you down. In addition to this, what I would say signifies how messy Moho can sometimes feel to use is how basic yet crucial certain scripts seem. If you use Moho but don't use Moho scripts, you absolutely should, as they unlock features and capabilities that honestly should just exist in the software. The good news is that unlike After Effects scripts, Moho scripts are typically all free to download. The bad news is that while some of the scripts are really helpful to save a lot of time, some of them feel like band-aids to solve problems that shouldn't exist to begin with. I'll put a link in the description to a database of Moho scripts that a Moho creator made, as well as the actual Moho scripts website if you're interested. Number 5, animation feature limitations. This is probably one of the biggest flaws that I've encountered lately that has led to even me, someone who really likes the software, to consider looking at other options. While the animation timeline works for most of what most people would want to animate, it can sometimes feel a little less advanced or intuitive than what I would want it to be, especially when compared to other options. Other options. Who am I kidding? Blender. Okay, so anytime I post anything about Moho, I'll get at least a comment or two informing me that Blender can do the same thing that Moho can, or asking me why I don't use Blender instead since it's free. And free is hard to beat, so I think that it's totally valid to ask that question, especially when going through some of the things that I've already talked about. However, as someone who does not know Blender at the time of recording this video, my admittedly flawed assumption has always been that Blender is a 3D animation software first and foremost, and that it would be more difficult and complex to achieve what a 2D animation software could using Blender than it would be for a 2D animation software, not to mention being harder to learn. You're learning 3D software to achieve 2D cutout animation. Why not just learn 2D software that is designed solely around 2D? To this day, I have not seen any examples of 2D rig-based animation made in Blender that looks as appealing as what Moho consistently showcases. Wait, actually, that's not true. I did find a YouTube channel by the name of Sketchy Squirrel who actually does exactly what I'm describing, animating 2D rigged cutout characters in Blender. And he actually moved from Moho to Blender to do this type of work. And in a reply to a comment that I left on one of his videos, detailed his perspective on Moho and Blender and how the two are different, which was really insightful and interesting. It might be possible, hell, if you can understand it, I think Blender makes anything seem possible. The question is whether or not it can look as good and whether or not it would be as simple or practical to learn Blender as opposed to Moho, especially if you're only looking to make cutout 2D animation. With that being said though, and this is kind of a recent revelation, Blender gets frequent updates, and thus seems highly innovative. In light of discovering relatively recent updates regarding specifically the timeline in Blender, I am definitely tempted to sit down and finally learn Blender again. If I were to compare Moho and Blender after having seen this new perspective, I would say that Moho is a very streamlined software that can reliably get you to an output in a predictive manner, whereas Blender is overwhelmingly flexible in terms of where you can go and what you can do using the software. If you're using Moho and you occasionally, like I do sometimes, want to do more than what the software is intended to be used for, you might hit some of those roadblocks or walls that you otherwise wouldn't using Blender. However, with Blender comes a lot of that creative problem solving that you might not have to do using Moho, considering that the software is a pile of tools that you kind of have to figure out what they do and use them effectively to solve a problem that it might not be set up directly to solve. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. I've always wanted to learn Blender, and someday, hopefully I will. But even then, I imagine I'd use it for 3D as opposed to 2D the vast majority of the time. I could be wrong about that. I really wouldn't know without getting into the weeds of using the software. So who is Moho for, and is Moho worth it? Well, whether or not the software is worth the money, I think largely depends on what it is you're intending to create and your expectations for how what you're creating should look. If you're a motion designer sick of animating characters in After Effects for any of the long list of reasons, or maybe just have a specific shot that requires more advanced features, I think Moho is a great option, as it allows you to animate smoothly in real time, achieve complex movements more easily, and can produce work that seamlessly fits into a look I would describe as very graphic design-ish, while also expanding the range of possible art styles that would have been impractical to achieve otherwise. If you're looking to make something that resembles a big budget animated series or film with complex detailed character designs, you might want to lower your expectations. I'm kidding. But you might want to view Moho as a tool on your tool belt as opposed to the entire toolbox, choosing to instead utilize traditional frame-by-frame animation for shots that require or would benefit from it, while also finding specific opportunities where Moho can save you valuable time without sacrificing quality. And if you want something free that might be able to produce cutout animation without any headaches, and it has an orange logo, you can choose Blender. That's also an option. With all that being said, it's important to note that there are no rules to how you decide to utilize software. Everything I just mentioned are just my personal suggestions / opinions that are based entirely on my own experiences. As I said before, I'm continuously inspired by what others are making with Moho, and regardless of what software I end up using in the future, I'm personally excited to see how the software improves and to see what people who use it will come up with next. Thanks for watching. I really hope that this was interesting or informative. If it was, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like. Do you use Moho? Do you like the software or think that it's worth the money? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.